It's my pleasure to introduce someone we all know and love, a very important and vital member of our community. In the center, we have a saying, give your time, your treasure, or your talent. And Chamaigne Sharette is someone who has stepped up in so many ways over the years and has demonstrated such a love for us and for this philosophy. She currently serves as a member of our music team, as you know, and also as secretary on our ministry council. Will you please join me in welcoming our very own Chamaigne Sharette.
Well, today is Palm Sunday, a Christian holiday, and in honor of Palm Sunday, I have a little story for you. One year, 8-year-old Billy didn't go to church on Palm Sunday because he had a sore throat. And when his parents came home, they were carrying several palm fronds, and he asked, "What are those for?" And his father explained, "People lined the streets with them to herald Jesus' return. They put them overhead as Jesus walked by." And Billy thought for a second. "The one Sunday I don't show up and he shows up?" Today is the beginning of Holy Week on the Christian calendar. And the events of Holy Week, which culminate in Easter next Sunday, is one of the central stories of Christianity. And one of the central meanings of that story has to do with the relationship between the divine and the human. In Trinitarian Christianity, God, who has no form, but is rather known by qualities like love, wisdom, omnipresence, God comes into the world of form as the person Jesus. So that meant Jesus was both divine and human. Not 50-50, but 100% divine and 100% human. Richard Rohr, who is a Catholic monk, says, "We Christians tend to only focus on the divine part. We couldn't put that human-divine thing together in Jesus, and so we can't put it together in ourselves. We're human and divine too." At Centers for Spiritual Living, we teach that we are each unique expressions of God, and that, in fact, all of life is God manifesting into form or becoming embodied. So if God is all there is, and we are expressions of that, are we fully divine? Yes. And are we fully human? Well, I don't know about you, but I am. And if we aren't, I don't know who is. So we're 100% made of God stuff and 100% human. It's easier for us to wrap our minds around something if it's just one thing or another. It's a little more complex when something is both, especially when those things seem like a bit of a contradiction. How often have you heard somebody say, "I'm only human, I'm not perfect"? Not perfect almost seems like the definition of human. And if I had to define divine, say that 10 times fast, define divine, perfect is a pretty good definition. So we're perfect and we're not perfect. How do we work with that? In our center's purpose statement, earlier we read our vision statement, but we also have a purpose and a mission statement that we read sometimes. In our purpose statement, we say that we celebrate our divinity and love our humanity. So loving humanity means loving all of it. That sounds good, right? But the fact is, sometimes we don't show up as our best selves. I know I'm not the only one who has that problem. It can be frustrating, embarrassing, and even cause serious suffering to ourselves and other people. Why does this happen? That's the age-old million-dollar question. And let's face it, a lot of humans do really atrocious things to other humans. It can be truly heartbreaking, or it can drive us to use spiritual ideas to help us ignore it or pretend it isn't real or doesn't really matter, or maybe in the grand scheme of things, in some way we can't yet understand, it's a good thing that some people experience unspeakable suffering at the hands of others, usually to satisfy their lust for wealth and power. Some of us believe there's a war between good and evil, but at least we're on the right side, and good will win eventually. I would never fault anyone for using any of these spiritual ideas to help make sense of life's most difficult mysteries and challenges. I do believe some ideas are more useful than others, and some ideas are truer than others. But ideas are like fingers pointing to something. We argue over whose finger is best pointing to the truth, but we can still honor that they are all trying to point out the same thing. The truth they're all trying to point out is there's something going on here that we would like to change. We'd like to make it better. There's some kind of dichotomy between human potential and current human expression. Now, thankfully, the vast, vast majority of us are not warlords, but I think we all experience what Apostle Paul said when he asked, "Why do I not do the things I set out to do, and I do the things I set out not to do?" Parts of ourselves sometimes seem to take over. We lose our temper, tell lies or gossip, gamble all our savings away, or my personal favorite, eat a whole cheesecake for dinner. Those parts of ourselves that take over and we find ourselves doing things we later regret, today I'm calling those the donkey. You know, those stubborn, seemingly untrainable parts of ourselves. It's a problem, so naturally we want to overcome it. Some of us think we don't believe in duality because we don't blame it on an evil force working inside of us. But still, most of us do wish the donkey would go away. There's a version of us that we wish we weren't, and there's a version of us we wish we were. We go to therapy and do spiritual practices and 12-step groups. We try to work through, subdue, or transcend the version of ourselves we wish we weren't. Even when we just try to love and embrace our humanity, in truth, sometimes we're loving and embracing our humanity so that it will go away. The problem is, when we want the donkey to go away, the donkey knows it. We might be all gentle smiles and yummy carrots, but he knows we're trying to put him out to pasture. And then he gets all clingy. What we resist persists, right? And it's exhausting. So what if instead of regarding the donkey as a problem, we invited the donkey to dance? That annoyingly stubborn beast in the field might just turn out to be the perfectly persistent partner for the dance marathon. Now, I've heard that a speaker should never expect an audience to understand paradox, but I have faith in you. Paradox is where the wisdom is. It's where the juicy stuff is. It's interesting. A paradox is when two contradictory things are nevertheless both true. For example, it's true that what you put your attention on grows, but it's also true that other couplet we hear, what you resist persists, while what you look at goes away. Put your attention on grows, look at goes away. Which one is it? Well, it's both. It depends. Wisdom in this case is realizing that resisting something is a form of putting your attention on it. And looking at something is a form of casting the light of truth on it, which sometimes makes it dissipate. I read a story once about a woman named Nancy who was having trouble with morbid thoughts. Every day she'd worry about how painful and difficult it would be if her husband died. She was afraid that the more she thought about it, the more likely it would be to happen, that she would manifest it with her thoughts. And so the worry just grew and snowballed and grew until she ended up at her doctor's office and getting meds for anxiety. One day her therapist asked her, "Could we have a conversation with the part of you that's worried?" The therapist believed that every part of us is trying to do something good. So the therapist said to the worrying part, "Thank you for doing your job. Can you tell us what you're trying to do?" And Nancy said, an answer just popped into her head. You need to have a plan in place. You need to think ahead and be prepared. The therapist suggested that Nancy let herself truly, fully experience her worry. So that afternoon, she went home and laid on her bed and imagined the worst-case scenario. He dies. She's lonely, impoverished, won't be able to take care of the farm by herself. She let herself really feel the scenario. She imagined his funeral, and she cried and she trembled with fear, and then she drifted in and out of sleep. But as her brain started to process it all, she started to think about neighbors who would probably come to help, and she could sell the farm. She even found herself wondering if her old high school boyfriend would be on Facebook now. She started to feel hope. She knew if her husband did die, she would be okay. She could handle it. She spoke to her husband about making sure their property and finances were in order so that if he died, she would know what's going on and she could sell the farm without any difficulties. And then that particular worry didn't bother her very often anymore. She was even able to get off her anxiety medication, and she was much more able to be present with her husband and enjoy him while he was around. And beyond that, she changed her whole relationship with worry. She no longer regarded her propensity to worry as a problem to be eradicated or even an illness to be healed. She invited worry to be an honored guest. When she deeply listened to what it had to say, it only had to say it once. Once the worry knew its message was heard, the energy expended worrying was freed up. She felt more energetic and creative. To dance with the donkey, to genuinely welcome every part of yourself, you must genuinely believe that every part of yourself is good and trying to do something good. Even those parts that are engaging in old coping mechanisms that no longer serve us, they're trying to do something good. When they feel heard and they come to trust the wisdom of the core self, they can transform. For example, children that grow up in unsafe environments, they often get really good at reading people. They need to see danger coming. So sometimes they grow up to have struggles with anxiety and hypervigilance, always scanning for danger. And it can become a problem. For some people, they get too scared to leave their house. But even crippling hypervigilance can be transformed into kind of a superpower. These types of people make great hostage negotiators. They seem to have a sixth sense for sensing how volatile a situation is. I heard a TED Talk where this police officer was telling about his partner who was this way. And they went to his partner's parents' house for a few minutes, just went inside for a while, and then when they got back in the car, she said, "Oh, we got out of there just in time." He says, "What are you talking about?" And she says, "Didn't you see my dad? He was tapping his foot and starting to sweat a little bit. My mom was wringing her hands. And my sister, she practically had steam coming out of her ears. Didn't you see that?" And the partner's like, "No, I didn't see it. I didn't sense it. It just seemed like hanging out to me." So you can see why this kind of skill could come in handy in lots of police situations. Don't even think about playing poker with people like that. So schools of thought that seek to reduce suffering, they very often offer explanations for the difference between some kind of worse version of ourselves and better version of ourselves, and offer suggestions as to what we can do about it. And when teachers first introduce concepts to beginners, they tend to simplify it to make it easier to understand. So in the beginning, we learn things like overcome human nature by inviting God to live within you. Starve the bad wolf inside you, only feed the good one. Kill the ego to unveil the divine self. Quiet the monkey mind so you experience your Buddha nature. Don't entertain negativity to raise the frequency of your vibrations. Transcend lower levels of consciousness and attain higher levels of consciousness. See past the illusion of Maya to attain enlightenment, the true Atman self. Wake up from the illusion of separation to realize our true oneness. Heal your wounds to return to your original good nature. Calm your reptilian brain and strengthen the prefrontal cortex. In most traditions, there are more advanced teachings to help you get into the nuances and really apply these teachings in a wise way. It's not really as simple as there being a goal and an obstacle and a way to defeat the obstacle. In fact, that kind of dualistic thinking causes new problems. It reinforces the story of separation, the erroneous belief that we're separate from each other and from the planet and from divine mind. In the worldview that everything is separate, it seems really sensible that the way to solve a problem is to identify the cause and get rid of it. But what if there truly is no enemy? What if, as the Course in Miracles says, there are only expressions of love and calls for love? Our beliefs about human nature are really important because they're the foundation of everything we experience and everything we create. How we relate to our inner world defines how much creative potential we realize, and how we relate to our inner world affects how we relate to the outer world, which ends up shaping our culture and how our society operates. Former President Jimmy Carter once said, "What is needed now is leadership that steers us away from fear and fosters greater confidence in the inherent goodness and ingenuity of humanity." I used to think I was an old pro at having confidence in the inherent good of humanity. I was raised with the belief that humans are born good, and we just get hurt along the way. And those hurts create triggers, which create our irrational thinking and our bad behavior. So the goal of life is to heal your wounds and return to your naturally loving, cooperative, good self. As good as that sounds, I recently realized I haven't been dancing with a donkey. Not really. See, when I imagine healing my inner child, I think of it kind of like cleaning up a mess. When you're done, the mess is gone. But if I had a real child, I'd be thinking in terms of an ongoing, permanent relationship with a complex person. I wouldn't expect just to make the behavior go away. I'd try to understand and help the child transform that behavior into something more effective. Maybe even turn it into a superpower. It's a subtle shift, but with huge implications. Dancing with the donkey means there truly is no enemy, not even our wounds and our addictions and illnesses and character flaws. I no longer think of these things as messes that came into existence and then they can move out of existence. I don't think it works like that. Instead of seeking to one day no longer be how I am, now I think in terms of loving those parts of myself into becoming something new. Taking how I am and applying it to life in new ways. I'm a lot like the people in the stories I told earlier. I have a propensity to worry, but worry is just a talent for creative visualization, right? I can make use of that. I'm hypervigilant, especially in social things. I don't want to be a police officer, though. But, I think being unusually aware of how people are feeling is an awesome tool for love. These are just wordy words I'm saying, but I feel this shift in my body. It's like a hose has been unkinked and energy is flowing again. Love is the answer inside, just like it is on the outside. Our pianist, Leslie Monroe, wrote a lyric that I love. There is no enemy. There's only you and me, and the way we choose to see the world. As I said before, the way we relate to ourselves is the way we end up relating to other people, which ripples out to the way our culture operates. So the way we see the world is really important. At Centers for Spiritual Living, we teach that we are all expressions of one divine mind. This idea is rooted and supported by ancient and modern spiritual practices and philosophy and psychology and science. And I would love to tell you all about that for the next 2 hours. but they might not invite me back to speak if I did that. So, learning to think and live from the truth of our oneness is a rich and lifelong journey. So I wanted to mention that just like other spiritual traditions, at Centers for Spiritual Living, we have advanced teachings too in how to apply spiritual principles with wisdom. It's not just Sunday talks. In our classes, you get to discuss with teachers and other students how you are understanding and applying principles. And sometimes just one little thing somebody says will create a little shift which sets you on a whole new path of well-being. That happened for me in the last class I took. So in closing, I would like to say that I know that there's not one person in this room that doesn't deserve love. Even if, like the Apostle Paul, sometimes you don't do the things you set out to do, and you do the things you set out not to do. And it's the same with the parts of you. There's not one part of you that doesn't deserve love. And love is what restores and renews and reorients those parts of you so that your whole being can be working together in harmony to express your full creative genius. Let's pray. At Center for Spiritual Living, we use affirmative prayer and to remind ourselves of the truth. And I speak in the first person because I'm reminding myself of the truth inside myself. And the invitation is that if these words resonate for you, you can let my words remind you of the truth inside yourself. So remembering the eternal and so oft validated truth that all of life is the expression of a divine intelligence. And that divine intelligence has qualities like love and wisdom, patience and charity. I am one with that because I'm part of life. And that means I have those qualities too. I was made of love. I was made of wisdom. And I can access those things inside myself and bring those to the situation at hand. So I know that when I'm struggling with addictions and worries, anxieties, heartbreak, and sadness about the things in the world, I know that we all have a core self that can't be harmed. We all have a core self that has these divine qualities, and we can bring those to every situation. When I close my eyes, I can just feel the truth of that. There's a persistent illusion that I'm separate from you and you're separate from them and we're all separate. And I love the dance we're doing of individuated oneness. But underneath it all, we are one. And we have that drawing toward oneness, toward connection. And for that, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful to remember this. It's an eternal truth, and so I can release and let go and rest in that knowing that we are one and love is actually the foundation of all of life. And please together say with me, and so it is. Thank you.